Hey, what's up? My name is Dwayne Eslick. I work for Miami Youth for Christ, and I'm partnering with Mike Gold, First Priority, Shadrach of EBS Church, to bring to you Regroup, a conference for youth small group leaders. Now, it's interesting as we talk about small groups for youth, I wonder, are they really effective? In fact, it wasn't too long ago I was visiting a youth group and I asked the youth pastor, I said, do you guys have small groups with your youth ministry? And he was like, well, we used to, but I found them to be ineffective. It was like the kids were kind of bored. In fact, I have the gift of teaching, and it seemed like, they were more interested in my teaching, and he was a dynamic teacher. It was like, and in fact, you look at all the problems of kids graduating, biblically illiterate, being in youth ministry all these years and just being shallow Christians. He's like, we want to go deep, and I'm a good teacher. And so we do game time and we have fun, but and I teach, but we don't do small groups. And I let the small group, it's hard enough to have somebody serving food, somebody to run the tech, somebody to sign people in. And we're running this youth program, and we really don't have enough leaders for a small group anyways. And so, we just focus on what we're good at, and I'm good at teaching. I was like, all right, interesting. And, I've visited a lot of different, some churches have a small youth group, and the youth group is a small group. Other churches have a big youth group, 100 kids, and they break out into breakout groups. And sometimes I've been to like breakout groups where there's like 15 kids, they only have 30 minutes, and the leader just rehashes the sermon that the youth pastor just spoke about. And I'm like, man, is this really that effective? They just hear 2 sermons and get lectured again in small group. And sometimes youth groups, youth small groups are ineffective. But I've thought about it from the youth pastor who was gifted in teacher to the breakout groups, and I thought maybe the problem isn't with small groups. Maybe the problem is how much time and money we invest in our small group leaders. Think about it. If a youth leader comes in, they're sacrificing their valuable time on a Friday night, and they come in and they get a text message, oh, here's the small group questions for tonight. They haven't had a chance to think about them the night before. They don't even know what the lesson topic is of the night, and they're hearing your sermon and they're thinking, how does this relate to that? And it's just an afterthought. How are they going to feel as a leader? Are they going to feel like the small group time is important? And then the youth pastor maybe goes over on the teaching time, and their small group time gets scrunched. They're like, oh, I guess the teaching time with the big group is more important than the small group time. And we're communicating by how much time, how much money we invest in our small group leaders that they're just an afterthought. They're just a little breakout group because, you know what? Maybe youth can't handle a 45-minute sermon, so I'll preach 25 minutes and then they'll get 20 minutes of breakout time. And, if we treat small groups like that, of course the leaders aren't going to value them, and it's going to be ineffective. And the leaders are going to quit, and they're going to feel like, hey, I'm not doing nothing that important here anyways. It's okay if I miss this night. And we've created the problem where the small groups are ineffective. But I really believe small groups with youth ministry is essential. In fact, just 3 quick reasons, there's many, but 3 that top come to my mind and what I'm passionate about is that number 1, you can't make disciples without a small group. You can't. Mark 3:14 says Jesus appointed 12. Jesus appointed 12. And you know what? If Jesus focused so much time on his small group of 12, should we as leaders not also focus time on small groups and not just big groups? In fact, Dan Spader writes a lot about discipleship and the life of Christ, and he says that it's less than 20 times in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that Jesus is ministering to a big crowd of people. But it's over 30 times that he's spending quality time with his 12. And in fact, even within that 12, there was a smaller group of 3, Peter, James, and John, that Jesus would take to even extra things and spend extra time to develop them as followers of Christ and future leaders. Now, you can't make disciples from a stage. You can't. You could impress people from a stage, and you could tell people to do something from a stage, but you can't impact them, and you can't show them how it's done. Now, not only can you not make disciples apart from small groups, you also can't raise leaders without relationships. Now, it says in Mark 3:14 that Jesus appointed the 12. Why? That they may be with him and that he might send them to preach. That they might be with him. Jesus was spending time with them, and then he sent them to preach. If you want to raise leaders and you want to develop your small group leaders, treat them as a small group. Treat them as your small group of leaders that you got to pour into, you got to invest, that you got to disciple into leadership. And as you place value on them by your valuable time, you will see them rise up as greater leaders who spend time with students. You can't raise leaders even amongst your students without relationships. If you want students to move from baby Christian to mature Christian to student leaders, it's going to take a lot of intentional discipleship. It's going to take relationship. It's going to be showing them how, not just telling them what. And so you can't raise leaders without relationships. And finally, not only can you not make disciples apart from small groups, you can't raise leaders apart from relationships. And finally, you can't grow the quality of your youth group apart from small groups. Oh, you might be able to grow the quantity. I mean, you might be able to put on a spectacular show and something that brings in the crowds. But you can't grow both the quality and the quantity without a quality small group leadership system. You know, reminds me of Moses. You know, after he was in the desert, you know, they had come out of the nation of Egypt. They had crossed the Red Sea. They were had already seen God do miracles, bringing food and water. And then, you know, Moses is there, and there's like maybe 1 million people. I don't know, it's thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, a huge crowd of people. And they started having conflicts. They started having problems, and they would bring all their problems to Moses. Now, while this was going on, Moses' wife had went to visit her dad, and she brought the 2 boys along so they could see their grandfather. And Moses is busy at work and doing everything, and his wife is on a trip far away. Eventually, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, is the poorest dad, brings the family back and sends a messenger to say, hey, let Moses know we're on our way. We're getting close. And so Moses prepares a feast. Jethro comes. He sees his wife for the first time in a long time, sees his boys, and is having a great day, having a family reunion and seeing his family for the first time in a long time. But after the family reunion, the next day, Moses went back to work. And there's all these people bringing their problems to Moses. And from the morning till night, he's deciding, settling disputes, telling them what to do. At the end of the day, Jethro asked Moses, like, what are you doing? So Moses tells him, hey, in verse 15 of Exodus 18, he says, because the people come to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it's brought to me. And I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions. It's like I'm the man of God. They know I'm hearing from God, and I discern and help them hear what God says about their situations. Moses' father-in-law replies in verse 17. He says, what you are doing is not good. You and the people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen to me and I'll give you some advice. May God be with you. You must be and he goes on to tell them, you must be the people's representative and keep teaching them God's decrees and laws. But he says this, verse 21, select capable men from all the people. Men who fear God, trustworthy, men who hate dishonest gain. And appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s. Have them serve as judges of the people at all times, but have them bring the difficult cases to you. The simple cases they can figure out for themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain. And all these people will go home satisfied. See, Moses was going to burn out if he didn't share the load of shepherding. In fact, if you're a student ministry director, a youth pastor, you can't do it alone. Even if you just have 12 youth, you need another leader. Divide up the guys from the girls. And if you want to grow that youth group to 20, 24, you need 4 leaders. And if you want it to have quality when you grow to 40, you need to have 8 leaders. You need to share the load. And if you're full-time, maybe you could disciple 12. But if this is like you have a family, you have a career, what if you had 5 that you focused on, or 3? And maybe you're leading a small group of 6 boys or girls, and you say, hey, I'm going to focus on having these few that I care for. You see, if you want to have a greater impact and not just have a shallow youth ministry, it isn't going to be by becoming the greatest speaker on earth. No, even Jesus, who was the greatest teacher of all time, spent more time with a small group. If you want to grow the quality and quantity of your youth group, you need to be able to share the load and put people over 10s and 50s and whatever the ratios, and be able to say, who's caring for this person? Who's caring for this person? Who is getting to know them enough that so when they have a problem, they can reach out with a phone call? You know, I believe in small groups so much because when I was a youth pastor, you know, the youth group grew to 440 youth and leaders, but we were able to have a great impact because we had a great small group system. We would have conferences for our youth leaders. We would have trainings. We would have monthly meetings, and we valued our small group leaders, and they poured into our youth. And we had pastors coming out of our youth group. We had elders, leaders, ministers, people that now looking back, I'm like, wow, what an impact. Not all of them made it, but there was leaders that were raised up, and there's those that they later send you the Facebook message and saying, you know, I didn't understand it back then, but now I understand that, you know, you as my small group leader cared. And I'm just amazed at the time you drove me and picked me up when I didn't have a ride, and how much work that was. Now that I'm an adult, I realize that. And you know what? I seen as a youth pastor how impactful small groups were. Better and more impactful than anything I did with a large crowd. And in fact, I'm the fruit of a small group leader. When I first came to Christ, I was in a broken home. It was just me, my mom, and my brother. And as I came to Christ, I had been arrested twice by the time I was in 6th grade. And I came to Christ at age 13. I was in 7th grade. And thankfully, that church, the way they ran their youth program and children's ministry, they broke us up into small groups. And I ended up with Mr. Jerry Hansen. And he would lead us on Wednesday night. There would be game times in a big group. There would be some small teaching. And then we would go to our breakout groups for a good 30 minutes. And we would memorize verses. We would talk. We would learn how to understand what we were studying. But then he saw that group as more than a breakout. He ended up taking us on a fishing trip one time, all the boys with another leader. And then he invited us, me, my brother, and my mom, over to his house every Tuesday night. And I remember his wife made dinner, and then we sat around the table and we ate a meal at a table. And that was like, whoa, this is amazing. Because at my house, we would sit on the couch and watch TV and eat and would not have meaningful conversations. And he was intentional, and he was showing me what it looks like to be a man and leader in the home. Then my mom would stay and talk to his wife, and he would take me and my brother to the backyard, and we would look at the few stars we could see in the Miami sky. And then we would just ask questions, talk, laugh, sometimes be just messing around, other times getting deep and deep philosophical, biblical questions. And he took me from a baby believer to someone who had grown and became a little bit more mature in my faith. And so Mr. Hansen was a small group leader who saw a small group as an opportunity, more than a breakout, and it's a chance to disciple a new believer from a broken home. I want to encourage you, if you're a small group leader, see your small group as more than a breakout, but as an opportunity to make disciples. And if you're a youth pastor, see your leadership team or your potential youth leadership team that you're praying for and recruiting as you're discipling them into leadership, that you're spending time with them, pouring into them, and growing your leadership team.